All right, in our last crop tour video, we spent a whole lot of time out in the cornfield digging up corn plant roots and seeing how the rooting structure and depth looks in our kind of environment with our no-till practices, with our intensively cover crop practices, and seeing just how much progress we've made in rebuilding our heavily damaged soil from 100 years of conventional tillage and cotton growing on it. So there's a lot of different plants out there other than corn plants. Corn is what a lot of people are interested in, but there's a lot of other crops that are grown. They've got different type of root structures other than corn. So that's what we're going to take a look at today, is plants that got a big strong taproot instead of a fibrous root system, and seeing are we seeing the same kinds of restrictions in the soil from a taproot as what we saw with our fine fibrous corn roots. So stay tuned. We're going to dig up some plants, see what they look like. All right, now just to recap what we did in our previous video, we went out into a couple different cornfields and dug up some plants. One of the fields was long-term no-till, intensively cover crop, but we were starting with extremely degraded soil. And then the second farm was a better ground, bottom ground, that we had intensively plowed earlier this year just to smooth out. And what we saw in our cover crop ground was where we've made tremendous improvements in rebuilding the soil. There were still some restrictions for the corn roots to go down through, but in general they were finding a way. It just wasn't as easy a time as what I would like it to be. So if you haven't already seen that video, I encourage you to go watch it first and then come back and watch this video. But the thing with corn roots is that they're really fine fibrous roots. They don't have as much pushing power as something like cotton does. It's got a big, strong, woody taproot that can exert more pressure to kind of force its way down through harder or compacted layers or fragipan layers. So we brought a shovel out here with us today. We're going to dig up a few cotton plants and see, are we seeing any kind of restriction moving down through the different layers of soil. As you can see, I mean, we got very healthy, vibrant cotton. Looks really, really good. We've had to strongly manage it with plant growth regulator to actually keep it in check. So my suspicion is I think we're going to see pretty free rooting structure down through there. There's obviously nothing that's limiting the growth of the cotton, but the roots tell a whole lot of stories. So let's see if we can decipher those. Now, I know it's hard to tell on camera, but we're on one of our steepest farms. We probably got some 7-8% grades right over there, and all this ground has been highly eroded over the years. But since we started working it several years ago, we've intensively cover cropped it, applied manure, and have done no tillage on it. All right, just picking a plant at random. This looks like a good one right here. Now we got this decent moisture in the soil, so I expect this to dig on up pretty easy. Now we go down pretty easy, about 3, 4, 5 inches, and then you can tell it definitely gets harder. However, in this spot of the field, as highly eroded as it's been, I would definitely expect there to be a fragipan real close to the surface with not a whole lot of topsoil. Shovel's definitely not going all the way down to the hilt like you would expect in something that's been ripped, chisel plowed, anything to that effect. But that does not necessarily mean our roots are not going through the ground. These roots in general can exert a whole lot more pressure per square inch in the soil than what I can stepping on a spade here. There we go. There, we actually got several plants here. We got 2 side by side. We'll take a look at these. All right, it kind of came apart when I laid it down here. The top layers kind of shed off, but here's the top layers. You can see real blocky structure. Don't hardly see any evidence of the plating that we see in our soils. This soil has really good structure. You can kind of see some dark colors here. Here's another piece of the topsoil. Look at those black lines right through there. I suspect that those were old worm trails that roots follow down, and then as they decompose, add an organic matter right back to the soil. And because we hadn't done any tillage, all of that's remained undisturbed, and that is slowly feeding the cotton plant here. And then looking out through here, you know, we got feeder roots. You can see where I cut off right here, but we got feeder roots going along the top part of the soil, top couple inches, and going out into the middle. All right, and then looking here, we flipped it around, get in the sunlight. But you kind of see that mottled color right there. That's subsoil. That is a naturally occurring frangipane. So looks like we got about 4 inches of topsoil in this spot of the field. Very, very shallow. But you can see right here, see all this dark color kind of working its way down, old root channels that rotted. Very little platy structure that we were seeing in the cornfield. Then trying to find the main taproot. You know, all these feeder roots are good, but the main taproot is what pulls a lot of stuff up in the soil. And here we got one coming off right here, and the second one of the plant is right here. So now that we studied the soil, let's break this soil off the roots and see what the actual root structure looks like. This soil is about perfect moisture to be digging it up and cleaning the roots off. Just wet enough that it holds together and you can see all the different layers of the soil, but not muddy or anything that would make it hard to come off. All right, we got 2 different plants here that we dug up side by side and seeing a little bit of difference. Look at this one. This is not the one I was intending to dig up. It was next to this one I was intending to dig up, and you can kind of see where my shovel went, cut across roots coming out to this side. But, you know, we're looking right here. That's the taproot. And that was about the depth that we were digging, about 8-9 inches in the ground. And, you know, it definitely extends farther on in the ground. But you can see it's real nice and straight until it gets right here, and then it starts going down a little bit, and then it comes back up, and then it makes another dog leg and back that way. That's it hunting through the frangipane right there, kind of in between the blocks of soil. It's going down through the seams. So this is showing us, yes, there is some restriction in the soil, and that's what we were feeling with our shovel. But there's not enough of the restriction that the root starts suddenly growing sideways, because it can't go any farther down in the soil. It's hunting and it's finding its way down through the soil to reach mostly water and some nutrients. The majority of our nutrients are going to be concentrated up here in the top 6 to 8 inches, but we do have taproot that is making it through, at least to this depth. In contrast to this plant right here, that was literally like 3 inches away from it. Again, real good taproot till you get here. Then it starts going down at an angle, and then, you know, it's not cut off or anything. Then it starts going pretty much fairly horizontally. So this plant encountered some soil that the taproot just could not penetrate through. It's not coming straight out. It's kind of going down at a 45-degree angle, but it's not going straight down in the ground like what we want. So after looking at these 2 plants, this spot in the field, I feel pretty good about where we're at. It's not where we want to be. We want to continue to improve this soil, break it up to make give these roots an easier time to go through the soil. But I mean, they are going down into the soil. You know, obviously the way the plant looks in this year, we're not causing any kind of yield restriction. And a drought, depending on what time of year it hits, could potentially cause a yield restriction then, because like this plant right here is not able to as easily access water deeper down in the soil as what the neighbor close by is. So we've made big improvements. This is a very slow process of what we're doing, but it's a permanent process as long as you keep your plows out of the field. You know, we're just going to continue to build on these results year after year after year after year and just get better. As it is, you know, some of our fields, we're only about 10 years into the process of really rejuvenating the soil. We've been no-till a lot longer than that, but in our opinion, no-till will only get you so far. It's kind of a band-aid. While you're not really hurting the soil anymore, you're not really doing a whole lot to improve the soil, especially if you got a lot of soybeans and a lot of cotton in your rotation, which don't add a lot of organic matter back into the soil. Now that we've seen that, let's go to a part of the field where I know for sure we've got some compaction and show you what those roots look like. Now, before we go to a compacted area of the field, I just want to show y'all something really what we're dealing with pretty much all over West Tennessee, not just my soils. All right, you see right here, we dug about 12 inches in the ground, and you can see several distinct layers. See, from this point up, really dark, a lot of organic matter, really good topsoil. And then we started getting right here, probably about 6 inches down, we start seeing our first signs of frangipane. Kind of see that lighter mottled color right there, and then it just gets even more pronounced deeper down in this hole. See, all this is kind of a tannish to gray color with streaks of red or orange in there, and that's iron in the soil in between the big blocks of the frangipane. And frangipans are not hard pans. They're naturally occurring from the last ice age. It's not anything that farmers have done. But as you can tell, you know, we got about 6 inches of good topsoil until we get to this frangipane. And there's a root right there that's trying to find its way down one of the seams, those orange seams right there. Now, even though frangipans are naturally occurring, there is something that we can do about them, and it does not involve tillage. While tillage will allow it to break up, it will quickly seal back over and become its natural state again. What I do to break up frangipans, extremely slow process, but again, it's permanent. Using annual ryegrass in our cover crop mix. There's been research that shows that annual ryegrass, I mean, if you know anything about annual ryegrass, its rooting structure is just absolutely phenomenal. Not a whole lot of real top growth, but its rooting structure, it's considered a super crop. I mean, it will penetrate just about anything and it will go deep down the soil. But the annual ryegrass actually secretes a substance through its roots that breaks up that naturally occurring frangipane to turn that frangipane into topsoil. Again, really long process, but as you can see in our hole, you know, we got a really strong frangipane here, and you can kind of start seeing it here. Right here is where I think we're degrading that frangipane into topsoil, and then this will continue just to work its way down as we continue using annual ryegrass as one of our cover crops. All right, right in here, as you can tell, the cotton is a little bit shorter, still is good and healthy, but right here, going along that line, about 4 years ago, there was a really small terrace right down through here that we really don't need anymore, but we decided to come in here and plow it down. We came in here and disced it up real good, ran a do-all over to smooth it over just to try and level it back out, and I decided I was going to dig a plant up out here. Now, as you can tell, looking at the soil right here, I know we degraded this some, but you know, just 1 year of tillage did not terribly hurt it. Still got good blocky structure on the top, dark color, didn't lose a whole lot of organic matter. But looking at the roots here, you can see we definitely got some restrictions. See, instead of coming straight down, here's the level of the soil right here. You can tell it immediately hit something and started going that way. Now it's still going down at about a 45-degree angle, but we really want it going straight down right there. So, you know, that's the effect of what tillage can do. We've got definitely some kind of tillage pan. You can see how this taproot kind of branches off into 2 different taproots. Don't see that a whole lot, but this taproot right here, it goes down about 6 inches, about the distance that about the depth that we were plowing the ground, and you see it immediately makes a hard turn going horizontal. It can't penetrate that anymore. Whereas the one beside it, it was still able to find the seam and start working its way down. But that's what tillage can do, especially if you're doing horizontal tillage like what I was doing, leveling this terrace out instead of a vertical tillage. And when I was digging this hole, I definitely felt a whole lot more resistance trying to get this in the ground, especially, let me get out here, especially there about 3 to 4 inches down. It's hard as a brick. But once we get through that plow layer, say the shovel's gone biting down in the ground quite a bit easier. So that one tillage pass definitely did some damage to the soil and giving us a compaction layer, and you know, that wasn't the natural fragipan. Now we can fix that through the use of cover crops, but it's going to take a while. But again, once it's fixed by the use of cover crops, it's permanently fixed. Whereas if you try to fix this with deep tillage, most likely it's only going to be a temporary fix that you have to keep on doing over and over and over again, because as you destroy soil structure, that ground just wants to collapse in on itself, seal up all the pore space, and then it just becomes like a block of concrete. That's why you need roots in the soil. You need organic matter in the soil to promote life in the soil, your microorganisms, your roots and everything. And then that's what in turn builds soil structure and keeps the soil alive. All right, just show you the difference of we're in an area of the field. I know for sure that it's terribly compacted. We're right here in the end rows, right by the entrance. You know, during grain harvest, we got semi truck coming in and out, grain buggies, cotton, we got module trucks, module builders, all that kind of stuff. So I know this ground is compacted. This is definitely not what we're wanting, but just to show you what happens to plant's roots when it most definitely encounters severe compaction. I mean, my shovel's going 3 inches in the ground maybe, and it's stopping. I don't know if we're going to be able to get these roots out intact. Well, I know we're going to get something here. All right, here's the plant we dug up. Where's the taproot at? It looks like this root right here is the main taproot. You see how it went like maybe 3 inches in the ground, and it said, I can't go no farther, and it started growing straight out sideways. Now again, I mean, this plant, I mean, it's loading up and everything, but it's definitely not as tall, definitely has encountered more stress, and definitely not going to be near as productive. Now again, this is a worst case scenario, but when you got compaction, even when you got a plant with a big, strong, healthy taproot, even then sometimes it can't penetrate it. And if you dig or pull up plants in your field and you see this, you know you've got definite issues. And issue like this right here, this is not something I would recommend trying to correct with cover crops. This is one of those applications where I think tillage is your friend. You need to fix that soil. You can't really wait around for cover crops to do the work. So come in here with some vertical tillage, chisel plow, subsoiler, you know, ripper, something like that. Get that ground loosened up, and then immediately, don't let that ground sit there, immediately get you something growing on this ground, whether it's a cover crop, a cash crop, or whatever. You need roots in the ground, because again, that tillage pass will only be temporary unless you get something in the ground to keep the ground loose. And the only way to do that is to get life in your soil, whether it's earthworms, microorganisms, living roots. You know, ideally you definitely want all three of them, but get something growing in the ground to make your channels in the soil, to keep it broken up to where it just doesn't seal back up into a block of concrete like what we got out there. You know, just in comparison, this is a plant we dug up out in the middle of that field, and you see, you know, this is what we want to see on a taproot plant. Good, strong taproots. And look how much deeper in the soil this is going. This plant right here is not accessing any water, any nutrients down here, whereas this plant is. Same field, same variety, same planting date, just a different part of the field. One of them heavily compacted, the other one, we're getting to where we want to be. All right, I know cotton's not a familiar crop to a lot of y'all, and soybeans might be a lot more familiar. So we're going to do a little digging out here in the soybean field, and we're not in full season soybeans right here. We're in double crop soybeans planted behind wheat. But this farm right here is, you know, definitely been one of my most eroded farms that I've had. I mean, you see how hilly it is. I mean, very, very terraced. And when my dad bought this farm in the early 70s, he said there was some gullies so deep on this farm that you could drive a cotton picker off into it and not see the top of the basket. That's how eroded this farm was. So been no-tilling this farm since about 1998. Started planting wheat on this farm 2007, and then started intensively cover cropping in 2015. So you know, this is the type of ground that we really specialize in building up and making productive again. As you can tell, I mean, the soybeans look great, especially for double crop soybeans. I mean, they look absolutely fantastic. You know, should be solid 50 bushel potential out here. But again, the key lies in the roots. What do the roots look like? Are they hitting some kind of hard pan, or are they accessing all the water and nutrients that's down there in the soil? So let's grab our spade and dig a couple plants up, and we'll see what the story says. All right, I know it's hard to tell, but there's a fairly moderate slope all the way down through here, so that, you know, this should be one of our, you know, most highly eroded places. And I really don't expect to see a whole bunch of topsoil here. Again, like I said, this was planted into winter wheat last fall. Didn't have a cover crop on it, but it's had a cover crop on it every 2 out of 3 years ever since you know, 2015. So looks like our spade's going, I don't know, about 4 inches in the ground again. Then it's getting kind of hard. Got a nice little root ball here. Let's shake it off on the tailgate, see what it looks like. All right, just looking at this, you can see right here at the bottom, about 4 inches of ground where it fragipan. Got kind of that mottled color, but it's not hard fragipan. We've, you know, we're in the process of disintegrating it, turning it back into topsoil. And then right here above, a lot darker color, and you know, got some good topsoil. But again, we're only dealing with 4 inches there, maybe. All right, we got 2 soybean plants here. They're kind of growing together. So, all right, looking at taproot right here. I mean, it's pretty much going straight down to where I clipped it off when I dug up underneath it. It looks like it might have had a little bit of a crook right there going off that way, but again, no really restrictions this year for this root mass. And same way here, got this taproot. It's like on 5-6 inches in the soil. It started going off at about a 45-degree angle instead of going you know, directly straight down again. So again, there's no immediate, you know, hard pan or plow pan that's causing it. It's just when it gets down to that naturally occurring fragipan, you know, it's got to go around the solid blocks to try and find the crevices, the weak spots in and around the fragipan, that mottled part. But again, we're using the best tool that we can to get rid of the fragipan, that being annual ryegrass. It's just a really slow process. And for the non-farmers out there, I want to point out all the little balls here on the roots. You know, to you know, somebody not involved in agriculture, you might think, man, it looks like that soybean's got cancer on its roots right there. But no, what these are nodules formed by rhizobia bacteria that they live in here, and they perform a symbiotic relationship with the plant to take atmospheric nitrogen out of the air and put it into a plant available form. And when you see cut one open, you see that dark red pink color. That means that the nodules are active and are, you know, fixing nitrogen for this soybean plant. You know, because soybeans are super high in protein, that means it takes a lot of nitrogen to make a soybean crop. And if it weren't for the symbiotic relationship with the rhizobia with the soybean plant, there's no way we could afford to plant soybeans, because I think, you know, 50 bushel soybean crops takes somewhere on the ballpark of 400 to 450 pounds of nitrogen per acre. You know, over twice what a good corn crop requires. Of course, you don't get near the bushels per acre off of a soybean crop that you do corn. So, you know, seeing our roots noduled up real good like that, you know, that means that there's plenty of bacteria taking atmospheric nitrogen and fixing it into a plant available form right there. And then going back to comparing the root system of cotton versus soybeans, you can see a soybean doesn't have near as robust taproot right there. I don't think soybeans have near the pushing power that cotton does, so any kind of hard pans or frangipans are going to more likely affect a soybean crop than it will a corn crop. You know, soybeans can probably push through any kind of hard pans, maybe a little bit better than what corn does, but not as good as cotton. So anyway, the bottom line is, hoping that the point I'm trying to get across from the last two videos is that there are ways to not have compaction in your field using tools other than tillage. Now, that's not to say that tillage is never necessary. There are instances tillage can be beneficial, especially as Dylan stated in the previous video, as far as speeding up the transformation of your land and getting it to where it needs to be. If you're dealing with some severely compacted ground that has been mismanaged for years or whatever, you know, maybe low pH and everything, and say you just pick that farm up, in an instance like that, tillage could definitely speed up the process of getting productive crops on your farm. You know, for one thing, if you do tillage, you know, you're mixing up the soil. If you're low in pH and you just applied lime to the soil, you know, a tillage action to mix that lime down in the soil will greatly speed up the raising of the pH of that soil. And then also, if it's severely compacted, you know, roots will loosen up the ground over time, especially if you intensively manage cover crops. But again, it takes time, and if you're dealing with a farm that's not profitable, in order to stay in business, you got to get that farm profitable. So in a case like that, you know, a deep ripping, you know, vertical, you know, real deep vertical tillage to break up the soil will be beneficial to you, you know, where you get oxygen down into the soil, where you can get water percolating down through the soil to where it's not ponding on top. But in my opinion, the key is, as soon as you're done with that tillage application, plant something on the field. You need living roots in the soil to keep that ground loose and to keep it from collapsing back in on itself. You know, whether it's a cover crop or a cash crop, just get something growing on that soil. And as far as when selecting cover crops, you know, select deep rooting cover crops that are really designed to help bust up frangipans and hard pans. Annual ryegrass is great, cereal rye is great, radish is great, rapeseed is great. I think crimson clover is pretty good. One thing I don't like that much is wheat. Wheat is a little bit shallower rooted crop, and it's a whole lot better than nothing. But if you're ripping deep down into the soil, you really want roots that are going to go down into the soil and do it quickly to keep those soil pores open and start building permanent soil structure. But with all that being said, you know, if your soils are in a pretty good shape, you know, maybe a little bit of compaction, but not much, but you're really wanting to get away from a conventional tillage system, then by all means, I'm a lot more in favor of planting cover crops on there than just going to a straight no-till situation, because again, the key is keep roots in the ground 12 months out of the year. If you're just in a no-till situation planting a cash crop, I mean, you're looking at roots in the ground 4 months out of the year, and then literally nothing else is growing on it. Your soil's really going backwards. All the microbes in your soils are starving. You know, they need the exudates from the roots to feed on and to multiply, and that's what really makes a good healthy soil. So no-till is a lot better than conventional till for erosion, but as far as soil health, it's no-till is really not going to help you as much. Like I said, you need roots in the ground 12 months out of the year, whether it's a double cropping situation like what we can do down here in the south with wheat and soybeans, or planting cover crops than a cash crop. You know, as long as you're capturing all this free energy, the solar radiation, and turn it into energy going into the ground, you are improving your soils. And then all that's going to do is just to serve to making more productive crops with fewer inputs as the years go along. But if you think compaction is a problem on your farm and you want to turn to plants to try and break up that compaction, annual ryegrass is the #1 thing to try. I know it scares a lot of people, especially if you grow wheat or whatever, but annual ryegrass is not Italian ryegrass. Annual ryegrass can be managed, it can be killed. What makes it so hard to kill is because its roots mass is so massive and it's going so deep in the ground that you spray it, and you know, it takes a lot of chemical to kill those roots, and then it puts right back out. But the way I found to manage annual ryegrass is when I'm planting green, we'll spray paraquat right in front of the planter, and what that does, that'll burn the ryegrass back to the ground, and then when it starts putting out, it's pulling a lot of energy out of those roots to grow again, and then come in about 2.5, 3 weeks later when the ryegrass is just starting to put out good, and hit it with a quart of glyphosate, and you will wipe it out. You know, like I said, I grow about 25% of my acres in wheat every single year. I've been cover cropping for almost 10 years now with annual ryegrass, and annual ryegrass is not a problem that I have in my fields. Radishes are also real good about breaking up the soil hard pans. You know, they got a real deep, strong taproot that goes down and bores through a lot of those compacted layers that might stop, say, a soybean root or corn root. Problem is, radishes can be quite pricey, and they also need nitrogen out in the field. If you don't have very much residual nitrogen in your field, they're really not going to do a whole lot. Rapeseed is similar to radish. It's a brassica also. It will bore down in the ground. It doesn't put on the massive tuber that radish does, but it will bore down into the ground. So, and again, the bottom line is not to talk bad about tillage. You can be successful, you know, practicing conventional tillage year after year on your farm. However, you will have more erosion, and you will lose soil that's got a lot of valuable nutrients in it. There's no question about that. No matter what you do, you will have erosion. You will have water infiltration problems. You know, here in Tennessee, we get an average of 52 inches of rain per year. However, it doesn't always come when we need it. If we get a real heavy thunderstorm that drops 1.5 inches of rain in June or July in a straight no-till environment or a conventional tilled environment where the soil has already sealed back over and been rained on, you know, you might only infiltrate, you know, 3-4 tenths out of it. I want to be able to capture all of it, and if you build soil structure, you know, your soil is a lot more likely to absorb all that water. And again, the problem with tillage is that if you're doing tillage, you're going to have to keep doing tillage, or that soil is going to turn into a block of concrete because there is no soil structure. Just because if you go out there after you plow the ground and you can sink that shovel down in the ground, that doesn't mean that you've got soil structure. That's not permanent. Yeah, the soil is loose, it's got a lot of air pockets in there, but there's nothing in there really to hold that soil together, and then it will collapse on itself, pack down, and then you got less root space, you got less pore space, you got less air space, less places to hold water. You want, like I said, a cottage cheese type soil that's got a whole lot of pore space in it, because roots need oxygen. You also need to be able to infiltrate water through the soil. So tillage does work, but the only problem is you got to do it year after year after year, and these tillage implements are insane in price. Diesel fuel is expensive, and it takes a lot of time to plow your ground. So again, it can be done. There's quite a few farmers that do it successfully, and I'm not going to argue with them because they're being successful in their own regards. It's just that this path that I've chosen, I think, is better for our farm long term in protecting the soil, protecting the environment, lowering our risk management, and just setting us up for profits down the road. Problem is, it just takes a lot of time. So anyway, guys, that kind of concludes this video. Hope y'all got a lot out of these last two videos, us looking at what's going on in the ground with the root system. And I think a lot of y'all will agree that while we've made tremendous impact on our soil and getting into the environment that we want it to be. We're not quite there yet. It's going to take more years of intensively cover cropping, applying manure, and not doing anything to damage the soil to get it to where we want it to be. But every year that goes by is setting us up a little bit better for the following year, and we're going to get there eventually. So anyway, guys, appreciate y'all watching this video. We'll see you in the next one.